Welcome to Global Risk Community Chat. Today we are joined by Bryan Falchuk. I'm very happy to have you today, Bryan. Welcome.
Thank you for having me on.
Yes, of course. Before we start getting into the topic, can you briefly introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, so I've been in the P&C insurance space for just over 20 years. Most of it on the carrier side. I was a COO for a carrier. I ran claims for another carrier. So I've been around different functional areas. But for the past few years, I've been on the InsurTech side. I was with an InsurTech startup for a while, and now I advise a number of startups and carriers on sort of all the change that's going on in the industry and how we all navigate that. And I've been publishing a book series called The Future of Insurance around that topic. So really fun time, I think, for the industry. There's a lot going on and a lot we can engage in.
Yeah, especially with, of course, the most recent changes due to pandemic and everything. I think there's a lot of changes we can expect. So I guess if you want to talk about it, of course, let's then dive into the topic. What would you like to specifically discuss with us today or share?
Yeah, so one of the things, as you mentioned, the pandemic, the things I've been able to do is engage in a series of conferences that the team at Reuters has been putting on. In particular, there's one that I think is so topical for a lot of the things that, again, to that pandemic point, that have become so front and center for us, more advanced kind of artificial intelligence, some of the new tech that's come online. And it's not that these things were invented in the past 18 months. A lot of them were there and coming along, but certainly the adoption, the engagement, the recognition of use cases and ways to apply them, that's become much more front and center. And I think the industry has engaged so much more. So Reuters has an annual event that they're putting on, and the next one's coming this April, and they've just started kicking that off. I'm lucky enough to get to chair that event. So that's what I wanted to talk about is sort of the path of starting to think about that has kicked off, and there's some really exciting things brewing with it.
Yeah, and would you like to perhaps share some key things from it, some things that you can already share with us?
Yeah, so one of the things I think they've been able to do really well is the speaker side of it. So making sure that it's people who you genuinely want to hear from. So there's already the list of speakers that are signed up is pretty impressive. We've got Monica Caldas, who's the CIO for global retail markets at Liberty Mutual, Peter Settle, who's the enterprise chief technology officer at American Family, Don Vu is the chief data officer at Northwestern Mutual, Amy Shore, the chief customer officer at Nationwide. As you can see, you think about what these people must be getting into in their work and focusing on, you can start to get a feel for what kinds of things we'll dig into. So topic wise, it's going to cover data, not just sort of how do you set up for success? Because a lot of people are, maybe they have a data practice, but it's not ready for where things are going. So they're almost reinventing that. So how do you do that effectively? And then with all the new tools that are coming into the data space, how do you make sure that you're implementing them in a way that you gain value from and genuine insight, whether it's AI and data privacy considerations, personalization, that we talk about so much, sort of next generation decisioning, all these things that are great buzzwords. But the question is, how are they coming to be in practice? And so some really good conversations around that. Similarly, on the tech side, again, lots of great buzzwords and hashtags, IoT, telematics, AI, et cetera. But all of that is really just technology searching for a home. If you're not thinking about, well, what are the real applications? How do we actually move the business forward? So again, a number of different panels and presentations and talks and roundtables to get people really sharing about how do you make true impact through that and get the real value and the ROI from it. And that includes the culture side, because none of this matters if your people don't buy in and if they're not willing to engage with the solutions, both your own people, your customers, and your partners, your agents, your brokers, your various vendors, et cetera. And then a lot more on sort of the big picture trends, the really big issues going on. How do we think about competition? So it's one thing, insurer versus insurer, but what about outside players like the car makers as they start to talk about doing insurance? What does that mean to us? And how do we compete in that space? And other sort of external shocks, the pandemic is one we've all been facing, but there are certainly many others out there that are either here now or could be in the coming years. How do we position ourselves for things that could very dramatically and rapidly really move the industry? So the event, it's April 26th and 27th in person in Chicago. It's a chance really to talk about these things meaningfully and to hear from genuine leaders in the industry to hear what they're doing. And that's pretty unique. And I think something we've all been waiting for again as we start to come back together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hear that it's going to be very insightful, very exciting with a lot of like big names in the industry as well. So, well, yeah, I mean, I'm not in Chicago, so unfortunately I can't join, but I wish I could. So hearing all these topics, a lot of questions that come to my mind, actually, like a lot of topics that could be discussed there. So I'm assuming our viewers might have some as well in their minds. So perhaps is it possible that you can share maybe some takeaway points from some of the questions that you have talked about that our viewers can already start thinking about or implementing on their practices?
Yeah. So there's and the good news is you don't have to wait until April to start to get some of the insights. So there's actually a steady stream of content that the team at Reuters is already putting out. By the time this is out, there's a white paper that you can get access to. It's called "Get Bang for Your Buck in the oversaturated InsurTech marketplace," and that's a conversation I think all of us have had. Is there's so many solutions. I don't know which one to choose, and how do I ensure that all those promises that that solution made when they were pitching to us and doing the demo and the RFP and whatever else, we don't usually get all of that benefit. So how do we bridge that gap? So that's another case of genuine leaders in the industry who are talking from their firsthand experience about trying to get more of the benefit and be clear on how you pick the right players to work with, to partner with, and how you build that relationship in a way that leads to better outcome. And that's something it's free, anyone can get access to it. But the white paper shares viewpoints from across insurance. So it's not just P&C or just life. So we've got folks from QBE, from Allstate, from Protective Life, from Aflac. So really wide variety of viewpoints, because every corner of the market faces slightly different issues and has different solution providers to think about. So I think it's always interesting for me to see what is someone in maybe a similar but different space doing, and could that help me in my situation where I'm feeling a bit stuck? So a really nice mix of views, sort of sifting through all of the different InsurTech options out there and figuring out which way to go.
Oh, that's interesting to hear. Then, while we are coming kind of into our time for today, which is unfortunate, but I have just one last question remaining, which is slightly, I believe, relevant. But how is it for you to be part of, in general, also risk committee? I know we are more focused on insurance, but obviously we cannot say like all these fields are super separated, as you were mentioning. The white paper also, I believe, included from different fields or outlooks. So I want to hear your opinion on how is it for you to be part of all this industries of risk industry as well in particular.
Well, I think it's fashionable to make jokes about it and to say, it's boring or whatever, but I don't think it is. And if you really stop and think, just look around, there is nothing that goes on in the world, in the global economy, that doesn't have insurance or some risk mindset, risk transfer behind it. So like the economy stops, governments stop. And when you think about that, and you think about putting lives back together and standing by people, allowing commerce to move forward, that's really profound. So I come back to that place. Is there's actually a huge purpose and intention behind this industry. So engaging in ways to move it forward, to be more productive, more responsive, more efficient, better decisions, all those things. It's not just about like being marginally better. It's about having a material impact literally on the global economy and the way that people live their lives every day. And so for me, maybe I sound silly to some people, but I get very excited about that because there is risk is tremendous. It's everywhere. And the tools to think about it differently are really changing before our eyes. So I think it's a very exciting time especially to be a part of this industry, because we shape so much of what goes on in the world. And we may not even remember that every day. When you wake up every day, I would just say that to people. It's just sort of come back to that place is, why are you doing this? It is to stand by people. It is to enable, people to go after what they're trying to build and not be stuck because of risk, because it would shut everything down otherwise. I mean, we've all certainly had flavors of that in the past couple of years. So that's, it's a sense of purpose that keeps me in this space.
No, I think I absolutely agree, especially on the fact that like I think, or most people perceive risk as very traditional field, but
Yeah.
if people look at from a different outlook, I can see that like so everything is related to risk, and how different outlooks at risk management can change it, like the way things are proceeding as well, for businesses, for governments, for pretty much everything. So yeah, I really appreciate your outlook on that, actually.
Good.
And actually, we are unfortunately at the end of our time. So I want to thank you for joining us today and sharing, what is waiting for us, especially in April with the event, and in general in the insurance field as well. So thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, of course. Have a great day.
You too.